Can lightning travel through the ground?
Yes. When lightning reaches the ground, the electrical energy can travel through the ground from some distance away. If you are standing nearby, the energy can then enter through your feet. This is also how multiple people or animals can be injured by a single lightning bolt.
Is Yellowstone actually a supervolcano?
Yellowstone National Park is renowned for its scenic geysers and hot springs covering some 2,300 square miles, 3,800 square kilometers. The energy for all this hot water actually comes from volcanic energy below a plateau that is actually a giant caldera. Geologists estimate that this massive volcano last erupted about 640,000 years ago with an energy equal to 8,000 Mount St. Helens eruptions. One can only imagine the destruction such an explosion would have wreaked. A nuclear winter would have ensued, acid rain would have fallen from the sky. And some scientists believe that the human race was driven almost to extinction at the time. Since the volcano is still active, it could happen again at almost any time. Some parts of Yellowstone have risen about 29 inches, 74 centimeters. Since measurements were first taken in 1923, which indicates a buildup of magma beneath the crust. It is only a matter of time before this energy is released. And Yellowstone is not the only such supervolcano. The last such eruption came from Toba, Sumatra, about 70,000 to 75,000 years ago, and other, as yet undiscovered supervolcanoes might exist.
What was the tempest prognosticator?
In 1851 Dr. George Merriweather displayed his tempest prognosticator at London's Great Exhibition. Remarkably, this leech barometer used the infamous blood-sucking worms to predict changes in air pressure and, thus, forecast inclement weather. Leeches require moisture to stay alive, and so they usually remain underwater unless it is rainy and wet outside their river and pond homes. It is believed that leeches possess a kind of natural barometer that tells them when a low pressure system is bringing wet weather and they can venture outside to seek victims to feed upon. Merriweather's contraption worked by placing one leech in each of a series of 12 bottles filled with about 1.5 inches of water. The bottles were arranged in a circle, and at the top of each bottle was a wire connected to a bell. When the air pressure was high, the leeches would remain in the water. When the air pressure began to fall, however, the leeches would become more active and climb up the bottles, eventually ringing the bells.
Can you use snow to keep you warm?
Snow, just like wood or stone or soil, can be used as an insulator. If there is sufficient snow on the ground, one can dig out a small cave or igloo-like structure. Crawl inside of it, and wait for one's body heat to warm the inside. To work more efficiently, it is best to be 6 or more feet, 2 meters, below the surface, and keep the opening of your snow cave downwind. Such makeshift structures can warm up to 60 degrees Fahrenheit 15 degrees Celsius or more, and can be quite cozy. They are a good way to avoid exposure if one has become lost or stranded outdoors in the winter.
Does thunder cause milk to go sour?
No, this is an old wives' tale. It may have stemmed from the fact that thunderstorms occur in times of heat and humidity, which are conditions that, in themselves, can turn milk sour.
What are the different types of satellites used today?
The two types of satellites used for weather observations are geostationary and polar orbiting. Geostationary satellites remain above a fixed point on the Earth's equator by traveling at a speed that matches that of the planet's spin. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth from pole to pole. These satellites orbit at a speed so that, 2 times a day, they are over the exact same spot on the planet in what is called a sun-synchronous orbit.
Is global warming causing the world's glaciers to melt?
Many scientists believe that greenhouse gases are directly causing glaciers in all parts of the world to melt and recede at an unprecedented rate. It is thought that by 2030 there will be no glaciers in Glacier National Park in Montana, in East Africa. Kenya's Lewis Glacier in Kenya has lost 40% of its size in just the last 25 years.
What is the difference between a National Weather Service advisory, statement, watch, and warning?
The National Weather Service will issue a statement as a first alert of a major change in the weather. An advisory is issued when weather conditions are not life-threatening, but individuals need to be alert to weather conditions. A weather watch is issued when conditions are more favorable than usual for dangerous weather conditions, e.g. tornadoes and violent thunderstorms. A watch is a recommendation for planning, preparation, and increased awareness, i.e., to be alert for changing weather. Listen for further information, and think about what to do if the danger materializes. A warning is issued when a particular weather hazard is either imminent or has been reported. A warning indicates the need to take action to protect life and property. The type of hazard is reflected in the type of warning, e.g., tornado warning, blizzard warning.
What is frostbite?
Frostbite occurs when people are exposed to cold temperatures for extended periods without sufficient protection. Skin and, if exposure is prolonged, deeper tissues, including nerves and blood vessels, can be damaged beyond repair. Frostbite begins at the extremities, fingers, toes, ears, etc. As the body tries to protect vital organs by constricting blood vessels at the extremities. This moves warm blood toward the center of the body. While this natural adaptation is important for keeping the heart pumping and other organs working, if circulation is cut off too long in other areas, tissues will die. The first stage of frostbite is frostnip, which is when skin begins to get numb but no damage to the tissues occurs. In first-degree frostbite, ice crystals begin to form on the skin, and a warming sensation in fingers or toes indicates the onset of second-degree frostbite. As the damage progresses to third-degree frostbite, extremities turn blue, white, or red, and in the last stages fourth-degree purple and then black. At this advanced stage, sensation is lost as nerves die, and it may be necessary to amputate. The best way to avoid frostbite is to simply stay indoors, especially if the wind chill is -50 degrees Fahrenheit -45.5 degrees Celsius or lower. If you must go outside, bundle up, don't drink alcohol or caffeinated beverages, and also avoid smoking. Drinking and smoking can both constrict blood vessels, thus speeding the formation of frostbite.
Do large-scale weather patterns lead to season trends?
Generally, no. One might believe, for example, that a milder than normal winter might be followed by a warmer than usual spring and summer. Actually, meteorologists have found no such reliable patterns. In fact, many times a warm winter is followed by a cold spring, or vice versa. A good example of this is the winter of 1994 to 1995. In the northern United States that season, there was a lot less snow and ice, and urban areas such as Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota, saved lots of money on road salt. However, the following spring was decidedly colder, and Minnesotans saw ice-covered lakes and ponds well into the month of May. Looking back farther in history, the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s saw severe extremes, with the United States experiencing many of its all-time record lows and highs in 1933, 1934, 1936, and 1937.
Because of their unusual what was the yellow bubble lightning seen in 1991?
And Bristol, England, two girls playing frisbee in 1991 encountered a bizarre yellow bubble of energy. It came in contact with them, and both received what felt like an electric shock that threw them to the ground. They lost their breaths for a moment, and upon recovering, ran home and told authorities. No one ever figured out what they saw, but it might have been an unusual form of ball lightning. Behavior: in the past some people have associated them with spirits or other supernatural events. Ball lightning can wander in and out of rooms, usually vanishing harmlessly, but sometimes leaving holes in windows or doors.
What is a wall cloud?
Wall clouds can be warnings that a tornado is about to form in a bank of cumulonimbus clouds. As a mesocyclone expands and gains strength below the cumulonimbus clouds, it begins rotating as warm, humid air moves upward and condenses. Convergence causes the gathering wall cloud to rotate cyclonically. Though slowly compared to the tornadoes it could form. Storm chasers who observe such wall clouds know that they can form full-fledged tornadoes within an hour's time.
Why is the thermosphere so hot?
While the temperature of the thermosphere can exceed 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit 1,982 degrees Celsius, the atmosphere here is so thin that an ordinary thermometer would not register this temperature. A regular thermometer would indicate temperatures below freezing. Instead, special instruments are used to measure the speed of the few particles that are in the thermosphere. And these indicate the extraordinary highs. Atoms and molecules in the thermosphere are excited by radiation from outer space.
What is an ombrometer?
An ombrometer, also called a micropluviometer, is just a technical word meaning a rain gauge.
What did the continents look like in the past?
Because of the movement of the lithospheric plates, the continents' positions have changed over time. For example, some scientists believe that about 700 million years ago a huge continent called Rodinia formed around the equator, about 500 million years ago. The continent broke apart, forming Laurasia, today's North America, and Eurasia, and Gondwana, or Gondwanaland, today's South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and India. Then, about 250 million years ago, the continents were once again together in One massive supercontinent called Pangaea, or Pangaea, translated as all land. Eventually, the huge continent began to break up, forming Laurasia and Gondwana again.
What are you seeing when you see your breath?
It can be fun for kids to breathe out on a cold day and pretend that they are perhaps dragons. But it is obviously not smoke coming out of their mouths, it is water vapor. What is happening is that the moisture in one's breath, humidity, is turning to fog as it leaves the warm confines of the mouth and hits the chilly air. While one or two people breathing out on cold days will not affect the weather. It has been observed that large herds of animals huddling together on a winter's day can actually produce a small fog bank.
What is an ion?
Ions are atoms or molecules with a positive or negative charge due to differences in the number of protons. Positively charged particles in an atom's nucleus. And electrons, negatively charges particles that orbit the nucleus. Meteorologists are interested in ions, especially with regard to the ionosphere. Because they are highly reactive with other elements and chemicals in the atmosphere.
What is weather modification?
Since the advent of agriculture, when food supplies waxed or waned depending on the weather, human civilizations have wanted to control the weather. Ancient civilizations typically did this by praying to gods or to one god to bring rain and prosperity. In the 20th century, however, science finally seemed to offer hope that our understanding of chemistry and meteorology could be used to affect the weather. There was considerable hope that cloud seeding, discovered in 1946, could make droughts a thing of the past. The potential of this technique never met expectations, though it still can be used under the right conditions. Seeding techniques are also employed to reduce the size of hailstones so they will cause less damage. The Weather Modification Association, which was established in 1950, is still active today and supports research in this area.
What two volcanic eruptions had the biggest impacts on the climate in the 20th century?
The eruption of El Chichon in southern Mexico, which lasted from March 29 through April 4, 1982, and the June 15, 1991, eruption of Mt. Pinatubo in the Philippines caused significant disruptions to the planet's climate. El Chichon shot about 7.75 million tons, over 7 billion kilograms, of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, as well as some 24.25 million tons, 22 billion kilograms, of other dust and particles. Coincidentally, there was a strong El Niño building at the same time. While the El Niño effect worked to warm ocean waters, the El Shishan eruption was cooling the atmosphere. And the result was that the two effectively cancelled each other out. That summer, when temperatures should have increased because of El Niño, the average temperatures were actually fairly normal. During the winter of 1982 to 1983, though, temperatures in Europe, Siberia, and North America were higher than normal. And temperatures in the Middle East, China, Greenland, and Alaska were cooler. This was because the gases from El Shishan had caused an Arctic oscillation in the stratosphere, changing air current patterns. When Mount Pinatubo erupted, it sent 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the sky. And estimates are that this resulted in an average worldwide temperature drop of 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit (0.8 degrees Celsius) in 1992. The effects continued through 1993. As the haze produced by the extra sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere reflected the sun's rays.
What is the largest known meteorite to strike Earth in the past 100 million years?
About 65 million years ago, a meteorite about 6 miles, 10 kilometers, across crashed into our planet near what is now southern Mexico. The remnant of this collision is an underwater crater more than 100 miles, 161 kilometers, across. This asteroid, or comet, carried 10 million times more kinetic energy than either the Tunguska or Meteor crater impactors. The heat from the explosion probably set the air itself on fire for miles around. It threw so much of Earth's crust into the atmosphere that it blocked most of the sun's light for months. As it fell back through the atmosphere, this debris grew very hot as it landed. It probably set almost every tree, bush, and blade of grass it touched on fire. The ecological catastrophe caused by this titanic meteorite strike was most likely the evolutionary blow that finished off the dinosaurs.
What are some of the lowest temperatures ever recorded?
The table below lists some of the most chilling temperatures by region that have been recorded by meteorologists.
What are the wet bulb and dry bulb temperatures?
Taking a reading of the wet bulb temperature is a way of measuring humidity. It is the temperature of a volume of air that has been cooled adiabatically until the humidity is at 100% and then compressed to the original pressure of the SYS temp prior to cooling. Using a wet bulb thermometer provides one reading, while a dry bulb thermometer is used for the second reading. The greater the difference between the temperatures read on the two thermometers, the less humid the air is. Using the two in conjunction is a single device called a psychrometer. The psychrometer measures the difference between the wet and dry bulb. And then, using established tables, the humidity of the air can be calculated.
What is the most dangerous month for avalanches?
More avalanches occur during the month of February in the United States than any other month. Colorado, Alaska, and Montana are the states where most avalanche-related deaths happen.
How can I measure how much rain falls where I live?
Any container with a flat bottom and flat sides can measure rainfall. The width of the top of the container must be the same as at the bottom of the container. But the diameter does not matter. It could be a device purchased for measuring precipitation or something as simple as a coffee can.
What factors affect the weather?
It has been said that a butterfly flapping its delicate wings in China will set off a series of events that will eventually result in a hurricane in the Gulf Coast. Weather is extremely complex. So much so that weather forecasting is a highly speculative profession. Some people joke that being a weather broadcaster is the only job you can find where you can be wrong half the time and still stay employed. Weather is affected by temperature, atmospheric composition, land formations, radiation, plate tectonics, geothermal energy, solar winds, biological processes from plants and animals, pollution, and more. All of these factors are considered in this book.
Do turtles and frogs have antifreeze in their blood?
For a long time, it was a puzzle as to how cold-blooded reptiles and amphibians such as turtles and frogs survived in northern climes. These animals' body temperatures unlike with warm-blooded animals such as dogs, deer, and people plummet with the cooling temperatures. Many of them live underground near ponds and streams. As the temperatures outside cool, their body metabolism slows down, which makes it possible to survive long periods without much food, or even oxygen. Furthermore, many species of frogs and turtles have been found to use glucose compounds as a kind of antifreeze that allows their bodies to freeze without their blood and other body fluids forming harmful crystals that would otherwise destroy their tissues.
What are some other katabatic wines called?
In addition to the Chinook, the Santa Ana winds that flow down the Sierras in Southern California, and the Taku, which is a frigid wind in Alaska, are both examples of katabatic winds.
What are the horse latitudes?
The horse latitudes are two high-pressure belts characterized by low winds about 30 degrees north and south of the equator. Dreaded by early sailors, these areas have undependable winds with periods of calm. In the northern hemisphere, particularly near Bermuda, sailing ships carrying horses from Spain to the New World were often becalmed. When water supplies ran low, these animals were the first to be rationed water. Dying from thirst, the animals were tossed overboard to conserve water for the men. Explorers and sailors reported that the seas were strewn with bodies of horses, which may be why the areas are called the horse latitudes. The term might also be rooted in complaints by sailors who were paid in advance and received no overtime when the ship slowly traversed the area. During this time, they were said to be working off a dead horse.
What is a tropical storm?
You can think of a tropical storm as a less intense hurricane. You can also call a hurricane a more intense tropical storm if wind speeds are between 38 and 74 miles, 61 and 119 kilometers per hour, then it is considered a tropical storm and not a hurricane.
What is a hypercane?
Professor Carey Emanuel at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is an authority on using computer models to simulate hurricane activity. In one extreme scenario, Emanuel hypothesized what might happen if a large asteroid hit one of Earth's oceans. Of course, there would be monstrous waves and immense heat generated by the impact. But there would be another side effect as well, a hypercane. A hypercane would occur after the impact because deep ocean waters would heat up. The result would be a strange hurricane that would only be about 10 to 20 miles. 16 to 32 kilometers across, but would have incredible winds reaching 500 miles, 800 kilometers per hour. Such a hypercane would also be capable of jettisoning moisture upwards of 25 miles, 40 kilometers, into the atmosphere.
What is a phreatic eruption?
Phreatic eruptions are steam-driven explosions that occur when groundwater or surface water is heated by magma, lava, hot rocks, or new volcanic deposits. The intense heat of such material can cause water to boil and turn to steam. generating an explosion of steam, water, ash, blocks, and bombs.
Do people frequently die from lightning strokes?
Depending on sources. Anywhere from 5 to 30% of people who are hit by lightning die from their injuries. The danger is not so much from burns but rather from the electrical energy stopping a person's heart. This is why CPR usually is necessary when someone is struck unconscious by lightning. More often, people who have been thus injured will be in severe pain and will be screaming as a result. While they of course will need medical attention, their prognosis for survival is much better than that of the unconscious person.
What are tides?
Tides are the consequence of any two objects that exert gravitational pull on one another over a long period of time. Basically, each object gently pulls the other object into an egg-like shape. Because the gravitational acceleration on one side of the object is larger than on the other side. On Earth, the most observable evidence of this gravitational effect is the changing tides we witness.
Where do haybubs occur?
Derived from the Arabic word hab, meaning to blow, a haybub is a violent dust storm. Haybubs are common in the Sahara Desert, as well as in the deserts of Australia, Asia, and North America.
Do lakes have tides?
Compared to oceans and seas, lakes generally do not contain enough water to have noticeable tides due to the gravitational effects of the moon on the Earth. They do have tides, though, and large lakes, such as Lake Superior in North America, are big enough to have observable tides. Lake Superior's waters fluctuate about 3 inches.
What was Hurricane Katrina?
Hurricane Katrina was the name given to the devastating hurricane that developed in the Atlantic Ocean, crossed the Gulf of Mexico, and struck New Orleans and many other cities along the southern coast of the United States in late August 2005.
How does lightning work?
The anatomy of a lightning stroke is surprisingly complex. For lightning to occur, of course, there needs to be a source of electricity, an electrical storm. Thunderstorms contain clouds that work like capacitors. The tops of the clouds have a positive charge and the bottoms are negatively charged. Scientists believe that this electrical charge may build up as the result of electrons being exchanged by particles within the clouds as they collide with one another due to temperature differences within the cloud, though just how this happens is a matter of debate. As the difference between the positively charged cloud tops and negatively charged bottoms increases, an electric field is generated. As the charge within the cloud builds, it has an effect on the surface of the Earth directly below, as well as objects on top of the ground. The negative field on the bottoms of the clouds repels electrons on the ground, which in turn causes the land below the storm to become positively charged. As the charge builds and builds, the air between Earth and cloud becomes ionized air molecules, break down into electrons and positively charged ions, transitioning into a plasma state. This plasma now serves as a conductor between the clouds and the ground below, or to other clouds, or into the surrounding air. Next, the cloud sends out step leaders, which are precursors to the oncoming flash of lightning. Think of them as ionized paths and streams of electrons that are like feelers that the cloud sends out, searching for the best path for the lightning bolt to flow through. Sometimes they may be visible as faintly glowing purplish streaks. Meanwhile, as the step leaders are sending exploring fingers outward, the positively charged ground or other receiving object is sending out feelers upwards. These feelers, called positive streamers, don't always connect with the step leaders. But when they do, the circuit is completed and the fireworks are ready to begin. Positive streamers can emerge from any inanimate or living object, including people. Like railway workers completing a railroad. Once the two ends of the path join, the train can drive through. This is the lightning bolt, an explosion of energy that occurs as nature attempts to equalize the charge between cloud and surface.
What are supercooled droplets?
A supercooled droplet is a cloud droplet that remains in its liquid form at temperatures far below the freezing point, as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Clouds formed of supercooled droplets pose potential hazards to aircraft that fly through them, because they can cause ice to form on wings and propellers. When low to the ground in the form of fog, supercooled droplets can also create hazardous road conditions by causing ice to form on streets and highways. On the other hand, supercooled droplets can also result in great beauty when they paint the landscape in a sparkling layer of ice that makes trees and other plants shine.
What are some of the coldest temperatures measured in Florida?
The Sunshine State is not a complete stranger to wintry weather. For example, 5 inches, 13 centimeters, of snow fell near what is now Jacksonville on January 11. 1800, and on February 13, 1899, the state had snowfall as far south as Ft. Myers. 4 inches. About 10 centimeters of snow descended on Milton, Florida, on March 6, 1954. The farthest south that snow has been seen in Florida is in the city of Homestead, south of Miami, in January of 1977. There have been incidents of light snow flurries, sleet, and hail over the centuries, including recent snow flurries in the Panhandle area on February 3, 2007, and flurries in Daytona Beach on January 3, 2008.
What is a land spout?
A land spout is, technically, a tornado, albeit a very weak one. Land spouts generally form from non-supercell storms, despite tending to be less strong than other tornadoes. They have been known to cause fatalities and should still be avoided at all costs.
Does lightning give off X-rays and radio waves?
Almost since the invention of the radio, it has been known that lightning generates radio waves. Since this property of the bolts has long interfered with radio broadcasts. Lightning generates radio waves over a wide range of frequencies, especially in the AM broadcast band. More recently, scientists have become fascinated by lightning's ability to create X-rays. The theory that this might occur was first proposed in the 1920s by Nobel Prize-winning physicist C.T.R. Wilson, 1869–1959, who theorized that lightning could accelerate electrons with sufficient speed to produce X-rays. For decades scientists thought Wilson was wrong, because they believed the Earth's atmosphere was too thick and that air resistance would slow down electrons too much. However, by the 1990s scientists began to change their minds. And in 2003 experiments with controlled lightning strokes were performed by Martin Uman at the University of Florida and Joseph Dwyer at the Florida Institute of Technology that demonstrated lightning can indeed produce enough energy to overcome any atmospheric drag. Such new research is causing scientists to rethink how lightning works.
What is a barograph?
Resembling a seismograph, a barograph records changes in air pressure over time. A recording arm with a pen on one end moves side to side, drawing a line over a paper or foil chart that moves over a rotating barrel.
Who figured out that temperatures rise in the stratosphere?
Pioneering French meteorologist Léon-Philippe Tisserand de Bort, 1855–1913. conducted an experiment using helium balloons and temperature sensors.
Does the Coriolis effect make the water in my toilet, sink, and bathtub swirl clockwise?
No, the Coriolis effect has very little effect on such small bodies of water. The flow down the drain is mostly a function of the shape of the container. Interestingly, if your body were completely symmetrical, and no one's is, and neither leg were longer and you were walking on perfectly flat land, then you might start veering due to the Coriolis effect.
How is a corona different from a halo?
As with the corona or anticorona, halos are created by light passing through clouds of ice crystals. Coronas, when they have some color to them, are reddish on the outside of the ring and bluish on the inside. While halos are red on the inside and blue on the outside. Coronas tend to be formed when altostratus clouds are present, while halos occur with cirrostratus clouds in the air. A halo's radius extends at a 22-degree angle from the moon or sun, but on rare occasions subtends at 46 degrees. Coronas have smaller angular diameters than halos. Because the cirrostratus clouds causing halos contain icy crystals that could lead to rain. Folklore about the sighting of halos correctly concluded that halos may predict oncoming rain.
What causes thunder?
Thunder is created when lightning rapidly heats a section of air. As the air expands, it compresses, releasing the energy as a sound wave that we hear as a loud boom or clap of thunder.
Does lightning only occur during thunderstorms?
Almost always, lightning is associated with thunderstorms. There are a few extraordinary cases, though, where lightning has been observed without storm clouds present. Sometimes, for example, erupting volcanoes can produce smoke plumes that generate the electrical current necessary for lightning. Even more rarely, smoke from severe fires can mimic these conditions, as well.
What is a mackerel sky?
Mackerel skies are the result of altocumulus or cirrocumulus clouds forming a distinctive pattern that looks like the scales on a mackerel fish's back.
What is an aneroid barometer?
The word aneroid means without fluid, and so aneroid barometers do not need mercury in order to work. French inventor Lucien Vitti, 1805 to 1866, built upon a concept first proposed by German mathematician Gottfried Leibniz, 1646 to 1716, in which a metallic capsule surrounded by a vacuum could be used to measure air pressure. Using very thin pieces of metal, Vitti managed to connect such a capsule to highly sensitive dials displayed behind glass within an encasement. This was highly detailed work on the level of the finest clock craftsmanship. Aneroid barometers were very difficult to make in Vitti's time. But high-tech instruments are produced today using such devices as electron beams welding copper-beryllium alloys. Because aneroid barometers are made of metal, they are also sensitive to changes in temperature and altitude. Bimetallic strips can be used to compensate for temperature, but altitude poses more of a problem. For this reason, aneroid barometers work best at elevations below 3,000 feet. About 915 meters, but they can be calibrated for higher altitudes if needed.
What is tornado alley?
The United States has more tornadoes than any other nation, and the majority of these twisters occur throughout the central states, an area known as Tornado Alley. About 200 tornadoes occur in Tornado Alley every year. The area is centered on northern Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, which has the highest percentage of severe tornadoes. Tornado activity, however, is also quite high in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio. The reason why there are so many tornadoes in Tornado Alley is that warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico moves northward and hits the dry air coming from the west, as well as uplifting air currents. These are the perfect conditions, evidently, for tornado formation.
What is the azimuth?
Used in navigation and in reporting the position of stars, planets, and other celestial bodies. The azimuth is the number of degrees between the direction of north, 0 degrees, and the direction in which the object is viewed from the perspective of the observer. In more mathematical terms, it is the angle between two vertical planes, one formed between the observer and the object observed, and the other formed by the observer and true north.
What is the Landsat program?
In 1972, NASA launched the first Landsat, land satellite, in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey, while taking photos and measurements related to the planet's surface. These satellites also provide a considerable amount of weather-related information. For example, Landsat satellite data has recorded the impacts of weather disasters, monitors flooding, and takes other measurements of interest to hydrologists. Recent surveys of land use have also resulted in studies about the effects of human activities on weather. For example, in 2006, an atmospheric modeling study was conducted on the state of Florida. Scientists compared estimates of vegetation coverage in the year 1900 with present conditions and demonstrated how urban and rural activities were affecting rainfall. It was estimated that Florida now experiences 12% less rain than it would have a century ago.
What is the difference between climate and weather?
Climate is the long-term average weather for a particular place. The weather is the current condition of the atmosphere. So, the weather in Barrow, Alaska, might be a warm 70 degrees Fahrenheit. 21 degrees Celsius, but its tundra climate is generally polar-like and cold.
Is meteorology considered a good career?
Meteorology is certainly one of the better careers you can go into in terms of income. Stress level, satisfaction, working environment, physical demands, and employment outlook. In its ranking of 250 careers in the United States, the 6th, 2002 edition of the Jobs Ranked Almanac placed meteorologist as 13th. While this is somewhat lower than the 7th ranking it earned in the previous edition, it is a lot higher than the 38th place it had in the 4th edition, so it seems to be moving up.
Is global warming causing an increase in severe hurricanes?
A 2005 Massachusetts Institute of Technology study estimated that because global warming is increasing ocean temperatures, hurricane frequency and intensity has increased by about 45% from just a few decades ago. In the 1970s, for example, the average hurricane season saw 10 hurricanes develop in the Caribbean area. By the 1990s, that number had increased to 18 annually. Hugh Willoughby, a researcher for Florida International University, has also asserted that hurricanes are getting stronger and more frequent. This has also become the position of scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Among the exceptions to this viewpoint is Florida State University professor James O'Brien, who has asserted that data demonstrates no significant increase trend between 1850 and 2005.
How much pollution is caused by smoking tobacco?
A 2004 study concluded that cigarette smoking released 10 times the amount of Particulate pollution in the United States as was caused by diesel exhaust. Indoor pollution from smoking has been in the news a lot lately because the smoke is much more concentrated indoors, causing health problems even to those who refrain from the habit.
Who hires meteorologists?
Meteorologists can either work for the government or in the private sector. If they work for the government, they may be hired by a federal government agency or department, such as the National Weather Service, the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the Department of Energy, a national laboratory, or the military, or, they could be hired by state, county, or city governments. Local governments hire meteorologists to monitor such things as air pollution and other environmental and resource management concerns. In the private sector, meteorologists can find employment at television stations, including the popular The Weather Channel, airlines, universities, utility companies, climate research laboratories, meteorological equipment manufacturers, private research contractors and forecasting services, weather modification companies, private environmental organizations and companies, and even litigation support companies. A good place to start a job search is the job board postings on the American Meteorological Society's website at http://careercenter.amitsoc.org. If at all possible, start building career connections as early as you can, preferably while you are still in school. Through work internships and contacts through your professors or other people you meet.
Are some people allergic to the sun?
There are two rather odd reactions some people have to the sun. 1. Allergic conjunctivitis is relatively harmless. This is when sudden exposure to the sun, such as when leaving a darkened building, causes a sneezing reaction inspired by the sun's ultraviolet radiation. It can also cause redness and itchiness in the eyes, which is easily remedied with sunglasses and antihistamines. More serious is something called sun poisoning, which causes a rash known as polymorphous light eruption. PLE, with itchy bumps and swelling of the skin. Even suntan lotion does not prevent this reaction for people who are ultra-sensitive to the sun's rays. Topical corticosteroids are typically prescribed by doctors to treat the rash.
How do factory farms contribute to air pollution?
One of the debates currently raging between environmentalists and the agricultural industry concerns factory farms. These are large, usually corporate-owned facilities in which there are high Concentrations of livestock or where vast areas of cropland contribute to fertilizer runoff. When it comes to air pollution, such farms are a major contributor to the problem. So much animal waste is generated by factory farms that large lagoons filled with manure and urine have to be built to maintain all of it. Some of this liquid manure is dispersed by spraying it onto crops as fertilizer. But that doesn't really help the issue. These wastes generate large amounts of noxious pollutants, including ammonia gas, methane, and hydrogen sulfide, as well as carbon dioxide. Such gases contribute to acid rain and ozone depletion. In addition, livestock flatulence, to put it bluntly, burping and farting cows, is another source of methane gas. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, 20% of methane gas generated by human civilization comes from agricultural activities.
What is an Alberta clipper?
An Alberta clipper is a storm that develops on the Pacific front, usually over the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, Canada. This quick-moving storm moves southeast into the Great Plains, leaving a trail of cold air and snow.
What is a solar prominence?
Prominences are high-density streams of solar gas projecting outward from the Sun's surface. Photosphere, into the inner part of the corona. They can be more than 100,000 miles long and can maintain their shapes for days, weeks, or even months before breaking down.
What are waterspouts?
Often associated with tropical cyclones, waterspouts are tornadoes that can form over a body of water. Instead of sucking up dust and debris, the funnel is visible because of the water it carries. While they tend to be weaker than tornadoes, they can still be lethal and have been known to destroy small boats and cause damage to larger vessels. The most common place to find waterspouts in the United States is off the coast of southern Florida.
How do meteorologists predict weather using changes in air pressure?
Meteorologists can forecast many details about the weather based on barometric readings. Generally, changes in air pressure indicate the following. Decreasing pressure foretells rainy, windy, stormy weather. Small, quick drops in pressure are good indicators that short periods of wind and rain will follow. Slow, moderate drops in pressure indicate a low-pressure system is in the area, but this will not likely cause severe weather. Slowly decreasing pressure over a longer period of time Foreshadows poor weather that will last for some time. Slowly decreasing pressure that was preceded by high pressure means that poor weather will be particularly bad. Increasing pressure is an indication of dry, colder weather. Slow, large rises in pressure mean that good weather is approaching and will likely last a long time. Rapidly rising pressure when the pressure is already low is a good indicator of upcoming fair weather. Rapidly decreasing pressure is a good prediction that a storm will hit within 6 hours.
How much time does it take for sunlight to reach the Earth?
The speed of light is about 186,000 miles, 300,000 kilometers, per second, and the Sun is about 92.58 million miles. 149 million kilometers, away, so it takes sunlight 8.4 minutes to reach our planet. Therefore, the Sun we see in the sky is actually as the star appeared over 8 minutes ago. Not to paint too depressing a picture, but if the Sun went nova, no one on Earth would realize the end was near for 8.5 minutes.
Why is it important to understand geography in relation to the weather?
There are a couple of reasons why geography is an important science for meteorologists to understand. One is that geographical features, such as mountains and coastlines, have an important influence on the weather. The other is that meteorologists interpret data from satellites, radar, and computer projections on various types of maps, and it is important for them to be able to visualize this data in three-dimensional space because the planet is not flat.
Can meteorologists predict tornadoes?
It is difficult to nearly impossible to predict where and whether or not a tornado will strike. All forecasters can do is warn people when conditions are right for tornadoes to form. Or, if one is sighted, to tell people to take shelter. Meteorologists look for tornadic thunderstorms that have strong indications of wind shear, lift, moisture, and instability. No one type of weather pattern leads to tornado formation, which greatly complicates forecasting efforts. To aid in their predictions, meteorologists use all sorts of technology, including weather balloons, Doppler radar, satellites, data from weather stations, lightning strike plots, and computer modeling.
What was the Dust Bowl and what impact did it have on the United States?
The Dust Bowl drought and dust storms persisted, to varying degrees. From 1933 through 1939, devastating America's heartland. The worst drought years were in 1934 and 1939, and the worst dust storms occurred in 1935. The Dust Bowl turned once verdant farmlands into wastelands, and huge dust storms swept across Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and even eastern states. But dry, hot weather was not the only culprit. Farmers at the time used techniques that depleted the soil severely. Most did not rotate their crops or irrigate their lands the way we do so today. The result was that when severe drought hit, crops died, and the soil underneath was easily eroded. Strong winds blew the dirt into huge drifts, also sweeping away what little fertile soil was left. The impact of the Dust Bowl was not only loss of crops, but also a never-before-seen period of immigration. As former farmers abandoned their lands and, in many cases, headed out west to states such as California. Author John Steinbeck captured the plight of these people in his famous 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Photographers Dorothea Lange and Arthur Rothstein, among others, also recorded these terrible times for posterity in black and white photos while working for the Farm Security Administration. Today, the impact of the Dust Bowl can still be seen in America's central states. There remain many ghost towns that were once prosperous centers of commerce for local farm communities where the soil is still recovering.
What is the global average temperature?
Data on temperatures for the 20th century, which includes both land and ocean surface temperatures, averaged to 53.6 degrees Fahrenheit 12 degrees Celsius. A 2007 assessment showed that, during the early years of the 21st century, average temperatures were already up 1.28 degrees Fahrenheit 0.71 degrees Celsius compared to the previous century averages. This data includes a very warm year in 2002, though 1998 was actually the warmest year since 1990. And the fact that, taken by themselves, land surface temperatures have been particularly warmer, 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit 1.89 degrees Celsius. Ocean surface temperatures in 2007 were the fourth warmest in a record database spanning 128 years.
What means scattering?
German physicist Gustav Adolf Pfeffer Wilhelm Mie, 1868 to 1957, discovered how small particles in the atmosphere scatter light waves. Called Mie scattering, this effect is important to meteorologists. Studying how clouds and haze scatter light, meteorological optics.
What is a Bermuda high?
Bermuda high is the term given to an anticyclonic system in the western Atlantic that brings warm, humid air to the eastern seaboard of the United States.
What is an Ekman spiral?
Van Waffred Ekman, 1874–1954, a Swedish physicist and oceanographer, discovered that a combination of the Coriolis effect, the movement of surface waters, and the friction caused by winds blowing on the ocean's surface have an influence on current direction. In the northern hemisphere, the end result is that currents will be pushed to the right. And in the south the opposite occurs, forming spirals like weak whirlpools in the water. The effect, however, penetrates the ocean's surface only to a degree. The null point, as the influence of these factors weakens with water depth. The layer affected by the spiral is called the Ekman layer. Scientists have noted that the Ekman spiral is most obvious underneath sea ice, because waves and other forces in the open sea nearly cancel out the effect. However, the Ekman spiral also applies to the Earth's atmosphere, where they are seen in surface winds.